Let's go ahead and get our hands dirty and build our very first Nuxt application. Now this application is going to be a baby name generator. So let's say you're expecting a newborn baby and you can't decide the name. You go to this application and what it does is you select a few options and it gives you a bunch of suggested baby names. So let's just go through a quick demo. So let's say I want a boy name. I want this to be trendy, so very common, and I also want it to be relatively long. I can go over here and click this button, and there we go. We have all of these different names: Abraham, Benjamin, and William. Now over here, I can also deselect some of the different names that I don't like. So maybe I'm not a fan of Benjamin, so I can get rid of that, and maybe now my only two options are Abraham and William. Let's go ahead and go through that again. Maybe I want a unisex name. I want it to be a unique name, and I don't care about the length. So over here, now we have Jude, Sunny, Tennessee, and I'm not even going to pronounce that. Again, you also have the option to get rid of these names. So this is a very, very simple application, and we are going to be building it with Nuxt. So let's go ahead and quickly discuss exactly what we are going to be learning when building this application. So the first thing that we're going to learn is View 3. So this is going to be kind of a refresher to View 3. I do expect you to know at least the basics of View 3 and have a good fundamental understanding of the composition API, but we're going to have a quick refresher with this project. We're also going to learn how we can create a brand new Nuxt application because we are going to be building this app with Nuxt. So we're going to learn exactly how we can use the Nuxt CLI to create a brand new Nuxt application. The next thing that we're going to learn is TypeScript. If you are unfamiliar with TypeScript, that is A-OK, but Nuxt 3 is actually going to be built on top of TypeScript. TypeScript is the default way of utilizing and developing in Nuxt 3, so we're going to learn a little bit of TypeScript as well. Again, if you don't know any TypeScript, I'm going to try to explain it as well as possible. This is not a prerequisite. The last thing is components. Now, components is something that we've been dealing with Vue all the time, but there's a different way that we're going to be dealing with them in Nuxt. It's a little bit simpler. So we're going to learn exactly how we deal with components inside of a Nuxt application. So let's just go ahead and get right into it by creating our very first Nuxt application. In this video, what we're going to do is create our very first Nuxt application. Now, this is going to be very, very simple, especially now that we have installed Node on our machine. Because all we need to do now is open up our terminal, which I have open right over here, or your command prompt if you're on a Windows machine, and very simply move into the directory where you want your Nuxt application to live. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move into my desktop directory, then I'm going to move into my Udemy directory, and then I'm going to move into my Nuxt directory, and then right over here, I'm going to do a ls, and I'm going to move into my content directory because that's where I want my project to live. Of course, you guys probably are not going to have all these directories. You can either put it in your desktop or whatever directory that you want. Now in here, we're going to execute a very simple command in order to create a bare bone Nuxt application. We're going to do npx, which we are going to get if we installed Node, and then nuxc, this is the Nuxt CLI, and then over here, we're going to initialize, what we want to do is initialize a new app. So we're going to say npx nuxc init, and then we're going to give our application a name. I'm going to call this O1 baby name generator. The reason why I'm calling it O1 is because we're going to have multiple projects, and I just want to organize that this is the very first project. So baby name generator. So I'm going to go ahead and execute that. And right away, if I do an ls, you can see that this has been created. So this new Nuxt project has been created. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open up an instance of VS Code. Let's go ahead and open that up. And let's open up that project that we just created. So I'm going to go to desktop. And then I'm going to go to, where was it? Udemy, and then Nuxt, and then content. I'm going to go ahead and open that up. And there we go. So this is our bare bone Nuxt application. Let me just zoom in once more, zoom out here, zoom out here. I think that should be good. So we get this bare bone Nuxt application. Now, if you're familiar with Node, well, you can go to the package.json and actually look at all of the different dependencies. The dependency that this needs is Nuxt 3. And all dependencies inside of a Node application actually live in something called the Node modules. Now, right now, inside of this bare bone application, this doesn't exist at the moment. So what we need to do is go to our integrated terminal over here and just very simply do an npm install in order to install all of the dependencies, which is just basically this right over here. Now, as that goes on, we should see our Node modules, and then we should be able to start up our application. Now, this might take some time, so I'll see you guys in the next video. The download just finished, and now we have this Node modules that contains all of the different dependencies that we need to run our application. So let's actually go ahead and run our newly created Nuxt application. Now, in order to do this, what we're going to need to do is go to the package.json. And in here, you can see we have 3 different scripts. Now, in order to run our application in development mode, so in a development environment, what we're going to do is run npm run dev, which is going to run nuxt dev. Remember, nuxt is the Nuxt CLI that is going to execute the dev command. This is going to spin up the application on localhost 3000, and anytime we make any changes to our code base, it is going to detect those changes and put those changes on localhost 3000 as well. So it's going to continuously watch for those changes. So let's go ahead and run npm run dev. I'm going to go over here to our terminal, and inside of the terminal, I'm just going to close this up a little bit. I'm going to do npm run dev. Now notice one thing, as soon as I run npm run dev, we're going to get a new directory right over here called .nuxt. This is the build directory that we're actually going to need to utilize in order to deploy. That's just a quick note, but we don't need to work with it right now. So over here, you can see that we have localhost 3000. So now let's go to our Safari application, or Google Chrome. That's actually what I'm going to be using, Google Chrome. And I'm going to go ahead and just paste in localhost 3000, and there we go. We see our boilerplate Nuxt application. So if you see this, you got Nuxt successfully up and running. Now, one thing that I want to note is that I am running this video on a 27-inch iMac. So really, if I went to 100%, it should look a little something like this. But I'm always going to be a little bit more zoomed in than usual, just because obviously this isn't very pleasing to look at. It's very small and we can't see a lot. So I'm zoomed in around like 200%. So over here, we get this very plain boilerplate application. So we have the documentation over here. We can click on it to see the documentation. We can click on to see the Twitter. And then over here, you can see that we can see this welcome page. And this welcome page is either in the app.view directory, or it's in the pages directory, and it's a index.view file. So let's actually explore exactly where this code, where this thing is coming from inside of our Nuxt app. So right now, inside of our Nuxt application, we only have one view file, the app.view. And over here, all we have is a template, just a basic view file, template and a div. And then right in here, we have this Nuxt welcome component. Now, you might be wondering, if you're familiar with Vue, and you should be if you're taking this course, where is this Nuxt welcome component living? This is something that we have to define. Well, this is actually coming from the Node modules. It's something that's built internally with Nuxt. And this is really good. This was actually done on purpose, because a lot of the time when you create a brand new application, you have to do a lot of deletion just to remove all of the different boilerplate. Now Nuxt understands this, and because of that, it just has this very boilerplate component built in to Nuxt itself. And as soon as we want to remove it, all we have to do is just remove the component itself, and we do not have to do anything over here. So let's just go ahead and save that. And if we go back, you can see now we have nothing. It is completely empty. Now, if we go ahead and let's go ahead and just paste this a few times just to prove to you, we should see this 3 different times. So right over here, the app.view is the file that we're going to be working on to build our baby generator application. Later on, when we work on multiple pages, we'll learn a better way to create multiple view files for multiple different pages. But for now, this is what we are going to be working on, the app.view. In this video, what we're going to do is go ahead and build out the HTML template for our baby name generator application. Now, this over here is not going to contain a lot of Vue and Nuxt concepts. Actually, it's probably going to contain none whatsoever. So if you want to skip this section, just go to the branch that I linked on this video and just go ahead and copy the HTML. If not, well, let's go ahead and start building it. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to have an H1, and this is going to be the title of our application, the name of our app. The name of our app is, of course, baby name generator, like so. We'll also have a p tag, and this is going to describe the app. So we can say choose your options and click the and then over here we can say find names button below, like so. Okay, so we have the title, then we have our little description, and if we went ahead and save this, you can see we actually see it inside of localhost 3000, which is great. This is awesome. Now, of course, the styles are not there yet. We'll worry about the styles in the next video. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to have another div. So let's create another div. We're going to give this div a class. We're not going to apply the classes for now, but let's just give it a class. And over here, we're going to say this is going to be the options container. So we're going to say options container, like so. So this is going to contain all of the different options. Now, I'm also going to create another div, and we're going to give that a class, and that's going to say option container. And so this is going to house one individual option. So we're going to have multiple options, I think 3 to be precise, so we can paste that 3 times. So the first option over here is choosing the gender. So let's actually house that inside of an H1. So we're going to say, or H4. So we're going to say choose a gender. So that's going to be option number 1. And then right below, what we're going to have are a bunch of buttons, of course. So over here, let's actually have a div for this to house all of the different buttons. So I'm going to call this, let's call it option buttons, like so. And then right over here, we're going to have a bunch of different buttons. So button, so the first option that we have is boy. And then we're going to have another button for unisex. And then over here, we're going to have another button for girl. Okay, so that's really good. So now what we can do here is basically copy what we have here and paste it right in there. And so now we're going to talk about the other options. So what's the option? Well, this one's going to be the popularity of the name. So over here, we can say something like choose the name's popularity. Okay, and so this is either going to be unique or trendy. So let's go over here. Let's say this is trendy. And then over here, this is going to be unique. And we can get rid of this. Let's get rid of that. Let's save it so we can get some nice formatting. So now that leaves us with the very last option. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to go over here. We're going to copy what we got right there. Now this one's going to be the length of the name. So we're going to say over here, choose the name's length. Choose name's length. We're going to have 3 options here. So let's have another button. So option number 1 is going to be long. Option number 2 is going to be all. And then option number 3 is going to be short. So now that is really all it is that we need for our HTML. That's pretty much it. And if I went ahead and looked at the application, this is actually, well, this should be a working HTML template. You can see that this is really ultimately what we want. Now, of course, stylistically, this is very ugly. So let's actually work on these styles in the next video. In this video, what we're going to start doing is styling these HTML elements. Now again, this isn't really related to Vue 3 and Nuxt, so if you want, feel free to just go to the link, go to my branch, and just copy the source code and skip this video. However, if you want to follow along, then, well, let's just get started. So the first thing that we need in order to define our styles are style tags, of course. So we're going to say style, and we're also going to say scoped so that these styles can be scoped to this file only. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to style the container. So the container is actually a class that I didn't define here, and it is going to house our entire application. So I want to style this div right over here. So I'm going to go over here, I'm going to say class container. Now right over here, let's apply some of the styles. So I'm going to say container. And the first thing that I want to do is I want to change the font family. Now right now you can see that we're getting this default font. So I'm going to change the font family to something like font family. I'm going to say Arial, and then Helvetica, and then sans serif. And that should change, if I refresh, it should change our font a little. Okay. So the next thing that I want to do is I want to change the default color. So the color is going to be RGB, and I'm going to say 27, and then 60, and then a 138. So that's going to be the default color. We're going to have this bluish color, which is nice. And then we also want to center this right in the middle. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to give this a max width of around 50 rems. And then I'm also going to give it a margin 0 auto. And I am going to do a text align of center. So now once we do that, you can see now everything is nicely centered in the middle. Okay, so that is the very first thing. Now what I want to do is I want to make this a little bit bigger, this title. So what I'm going to say here is inside of the container, grab the H1, or we can honestly just do H1 because we just have one H1 in there. And we can say font size 3 rems. And now you can see now that is a little bit bigger. Now mind you that I am zoomed in because it would look relatively small if I haven't. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue on. So the next thing that I want to do is I want to start working on the options container. So right over here, this whole thing should be wrapped in a container, and it should have some nice background color. So let's go over here, and let's just say options container. And keep in mind, we have an S here, so options container. And then over here, we're going to have a background color, not clip, color. And this is going to be RGB. And then over here, we're going to say 255. We're going to say 238 and then 236. So that is going to be the color. And you can see here now we're getting that wonderful little color that's wrapping all of our different options. Now the next thing that we need to do is apply a border radius so we can get those rounded corners. So we're going to say 2 rems for that. And now you can see we get the cool rounded corners. Now, of course, we need some padding. So let's go here. We're going to say padding 1 rem. Now we get some nice little padding. And let's actually make this width 95%. So we're going to say 95% of the width, like so. And then what we're going to do is we're going to also apply a margin 0 auto so we can center it. And let's give it a margin top of 4 rems. And we're also going to give it a position relative like so. So let's go ahead and save that. And now you can see that it is very, very big and everything is nicely centered the way that we want it to. Okay, so that is pretty much all we need. Now let's start styling the options themselves. So the option containers themselves. Now the only thing that I want to do is have just a little bit more spacing between each option. Let me zoom out of here a little bit. And so in order to do this, we can just apply a margin. So we can say option and then dash container. And we're going to say margin bottom of, let's go 2 rems here. And there we go. So now we got this wonderful margin bottom. Now, the next thing that we need to do is style the buttons themselves. So over here, what I'm going to do is instead of actually grabbing the button, I'm just going to give all the buttons a class of option because that's exactly what they are. They're options. So over here, let's just give it a class of option, class of option, class of option, class of option. Over here, class of option, and then lastly, class of option right over here. So what I'm going to do is we're going to style the option now. So we're going to give this a background color of white. So we're going to give it a background color of white. We're also going to give it an outline of 0.15 rems. We're going to say solid. And we're also going to say that the color is going to be RGB. And we're going to say 249 and then 87 and then 89. Okay. We're also going to give it a border of none. We're going to give it some padding. This is going to be 0.75 rems. We're also going to give it some width. So let's say width of 120 or 100 or 12 rems over here. And let's go ahead and close that off. And now let's give it a font size of 1 rem, a color of RGB. Then we're going to say 27, 60, and 138. And then let's give it a cursor of pointer. And then what do we need? We need font weight of 200. So now if we go ahead and save that, you can see that this is exactly what we get. So this is looking really, really good. Now the last thing that is missing is right over here. So to the right and to the left, we want to have those rounded corners. So what we need to do is we need to actually apply some conditional styles here. So over here, what we can do is at the very top, we can say something like this is going to be to the left. So we can also give this another class of option left. This one is going to be option right. Now we can do the same thing over here. You can say option left here, option right here. And then over here we can say that this is also going to be to the left. This is going to be to the right. Now right down here, now what we can do is just say option left, and we can just give it a border radius. So we can say border radius, and this is only going to apply to the left side. So what we can say here is we can say 1 rem to the top right corner, and then, or sorry, to the top left corner, and then 0 rems in the top right corner, and then 0 rems in the top or the bottom right corner, and then the bottom. Okay, I think I'm getting myself confused here. So 1 rem in the top left, 0 in the top right, 0 in the bottom right, and then 1 in the bottom left. So that's what it means right there. So now what we can do here is copy that, paste it over here, and also now what we could do is just basically flip this around. So you can say 0, 1 rem, 1 rem, and then 0 like so. So now let's just go ahead and save that. And now you can see our styling is pretty much done at this point. So that's pretty much all it is that we need to do for styling. Now let's get into the fun stuff where we start working with Vue 3 and Nuxt. In this video, what we're going to start doing is managing the state of our application. Specifically, we're going to be managing the options that we have clicked on. So when we click on, let's say, girl, our state should change so that girl is the selected option, and this should be all colored in. So we should know how to do this. However, if you don't, let's just go ahead and follow along. So we're going to create a script tag. This is where we're going to house all of our JavaScript, and thus we're also going to house all of our state as well. So right inside of this script tag. So right in here, what we're going to do is we're actually going to use the composition API for this. This is for Vue 3, and Nuxt utilizes Vue 3. So instead of just having an empty script tag, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say script setup, like so. And what I actually prefer to do is grab the script and just place it all the way at the very top. I think it's just a little bit more organized. Doesn't really matter where you place it, but I prefer to have my script here, my template here, and then my CSS at the very end. Okay, so now that we got that set up, we can start creating our state. So let's go over here, and I'm going to declare a new variable, and this variable is going to be called options. Now this is going to store the current state of our application, and it's going to store an object to do this. So what we're going to do is utilize reactive in order to have a state of objects. Now notice that I actually didn't import reactive from Vue. Nuxt is really great when it comes to auto importation. So what we can do here is just very simply say reactive like so, and Nuxt will understand that this is reactive from Vue and import it into this file. So right over here, we're going to have three different states. This is going to be the gender. Initially, let's just set it as girl. And then over here, we're going to have the popularity. So popularity. Initially, let's just send that as unique. And then we're also going to have the length. Initially, let's have that as short. So right over here, this is our current state of our application. And of course, we want to modify this state in some way. But for now, what we want to do is we want to grab the state inside of the HTML template and change the background color of the button. So if it's girl, then this button right over here, it should be colored in. And then over here for unique, because the popularity is unique, this should be colored in, and also this should be colored in as well. So let's actually go ahead into our buttons. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add another class right over here, right at the very bottom. And this I'm going to call option active. So I'm going to say option active, because this is the active button that's being clicked. And we're going to give that some styles. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a background color of that border that we have right over here. So this outline. So let's go ahead and copy that and paste that in there. And we're also going to give it a color of white. So we're going to change the color to white like so. And so now what we're going to do is right over here. So right over here on this button, we're going to actually apply that as well. And we should get something that looks like so. Now, right now we are adding it manually. What we want to do is we want to do it dynamically only if the option.gender is equal to girl. So let's go over here and let's actually make this multiple lines, because this is going to get a little bit more complicated. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say :class to define that we want to have some sort of JavaScript in these parentheses. And we're going to say only if the options.length, or the options.gender triple equals girl, then what we want to do is apply the class. So then we can say and, so and then quotes. Then over here we can say option active. So now if we save that, you can see that this is working okay. And we're probably going to want to do that for all of the other buttons as well. So right over here, we can say if this is equal to unisex. So unisex. And then over here, we can say the same thing. and say if this is equal to boy. Let's go ahead and save that. And now let's go ahead and change this, for example, to unisex. Now you can see that this one is the one that is colored in. Okay, so this is looking good. Let's actually apply these to the different buttons as well. So the trendy and unique buttons. So let's just grab this. And let's go here, paste that in. And then let's go over here, paste that in as well. We're going to say if the options dot and what was it? Options dot popularity. If that is equal to trendy. And then over here, we're going to say options dot popularity. If that is equal to unique. Let's go ahead and save that. And by the way, if you're wondering how in the world do we have access to this reactive state inside of the template, we're not exporting anything. Well, with script setup, we don't have to export anything. Everything is just automatically imported over here, and we can have access to it. Whereas with maybe the script setup function or the options API, we have to explicitly say what we want to export. So that's why we have access to this options object right over here. So last thing over here is what we're going to do is we're going to just copy this, paste that in here like moi. And then over here, we're going to say that this is going to be the length. So length. And then right over here, we're going to change this to, this is going to be long. So let's go ahead and copy that 2 more times. Paste that in there, and then paste that in there. And this is going to be all, and this is going to be shorts. So that's pretty much all it is that we need. And now you can see that we have some state going on here. Maybe just to make this a little bit nicer, let's make this long so we have, you know, some mixture of things going on. Okay, so this is really good. Now, of course, if we click on it, what we need to do is we need to change our state. And by changing the state, then it will also change the different colors of the buttons. But before we do that, I actually want to refactor the way that we've done this, because we've done this with plain old vanilla JavaScript, but I prefer, in my opinion, to use TypeScript. And that's what we're going to be using throughout this course. So let's actually look at a better way of doing this by utilizing TypeScript. So we have created our state and it is working the way that we expect it to. However, right now we have 2 potential problems that could arise, especially if we haven't worked on this application for a while or if we're working with a larger team. So let's actually talk about that issue. Right now, our options is an object, and that object should only include the gender, popularity, and the length, because those are the only options that we have. However, right now, we have the ability to add other properties. So for example, we can add this random property called milk, and we can assign that to be equal to true. And this is okay the way that we have set things up. And obviously, we probably do not want to add this property inside of this reactive state. So that's problem number 1. Problem number 2 is the value of these properties. Right now, we have specified that this is a girl, but it also could be a boy, and it also could be unisex. However, we could also specify that this is going to be something like, I don't know, girly, or whatever. We can add whatever thing that we want. And obviously, we do not want to have this ability. You can either choose girl, boy, or unisex. Similarly over here, for this property, you can only choose unique or trendy. You can't put anything else in there. So those are the 2 potential issues that we are facing. Now, in order to fix this, what we need to do is explicitly define the type of our properties. And this is where TypeScript comes into place. So right now, we've been using plain old vanilla JavaScript. However, what we want to do is use TypeScript to define the types of our variables and our state. Now, if this doesn't make much sense to you, well, let me explain. So in order to actually utilize TypeScript inside of this script tag, all we need to do is right after the setup, or before if you want to, we can specify that the language is going to be equal to TS. And we can go ahead and save that. And there we go. Now we can utilize TypeScript. Now, right away, you can see that nothing has really changed. If we go back to our application and refresh, nothing has changed. And that's A-okay. This is expected. But now what we're going to do is get a bunch of different properties that we can utilize to define specific types. Just to quickly explain exactly what I mean here, I'm going to declare a variable. I'm going to make this a let. I'm going to say let my name. And I'm going to say that this is going to be equal to Lathe, like so. Now, over here, I'm going to go ahead and reassign my name to my age, which is 25. Now, if we weren't using TypeScript, let me just get rid of this for now. You can see, and save that, you can see that this is actually A-okay. This is completely fine. Now, if we go back and we add TypeScript again, now this is actually not fine. We get this squiggly line. And if we go over here, you can see that it's saying that the type number is not assignable to type string. So because what we did here was we declared that this is going to be equal to lathe, the string lathe, it gave this the type of string. And that's basically how it assigned it. So it was like let my name colon string. And we can also explicitly say that this is going to be of type string like so. And now what we're doing is we're trying to reassign that to a number, and TypeScript is yelling at us. So we can't do this. And this is really good because, of course, we don't often want to change types. So over here, we can do this. And if we said something like 23, then now it's going to yell at us saying that this is equal to 23 when it should be a string. So over here, that is going to give us a little bit of extra security and maintain the integrity of our code base. So now what we're going to do is we're actually going to define the type of this state object. So just for now, I'm going to just duplicate this object. I'm going to say const object. And I'm going to say that this is going to be equal to an empty object. And I'm going to try to give it the exact same type as we have over here. Now, in order to define a type of an object, TypeScript gives us this very important thing called interface. So this is going to allow us to define the type of an object. So we're going to say interface, and I'm going to call this, well, whatever it is that we want to call it. So I'm going to call this option state, because that's what we're trying to define, the option state. And we're going to do curly braces. Now, right in here, we're going to define the type of each key value pair. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to say that, hey, there is going to have a key, and that's going to be called gender. And this is going to have a type of string. And then we do semicolons. We're also going to say that this object should have a popularity key, and it should have a value of string. And lastly, we should have a length key that has also a value of string. And now what we can do is we can actually apply this interface to this object. So we can say colon and then options state. And right away, you can see that we're getting a little bit of issues telling us, hey, we do not have the gender or popularity or length keys right over here. So now what we can do is we can apply gender, and you can see right away we're actually getting this cool autofill. And that's because it understands the type. So you can say gender, you can just put whatever string that we want in here. Let's just say girl for now. And then over here, we can say something like length, and we can say all. And then lastly, the popularity is going to be unique, like so. So right away, you can see that now it's happy with us. And if we added an additional property like milk is equal to true, it's going to yell at us because it's saying that, hey, this isn't part of the type right over here. We didn't define this. So if this was indeed a property that we wanted to add, we would have to explicitly go to the interface and then define here that we want to have a property called milk that is a Boolean. And that pretty much means that, yes, we indeed want to do this. Now, of course, we don't want to do this. So let's just go ahead and get rid of that. So that solves problem number 1. But what is problem number 2? Well, problem number 2 is we're defining that this is going to be a very generic string. So we could, if we wanted to over here, instead of saying maybe length of all, we can say length of medium. And that's actually not an option that we support. We only have short, long, or all of them. But we don't have this medium option. Now, maybe another engineer that's not very familiar with this app they could add this in there, and that's completely fine with TypeScript. So what we can do is we need to actually explicitly say the different types of strings that we can have for a specific key. Now in TypeScript, there's another thing that we can utilize called an enum to define this. So we're going to say enum gender, and we're going to do curly braces. And then right in here, we're going to define all of the different options that we have for a particular gender option. So over here, I'm going to say gender, and then I'm going to say something like girl. And this is all going to be in capital. We can actually assign that to the value of the string value of girl like so. Then I'm going to do comma. And it's all in capital just because it's just a common convention. We're going to say boy. And then over here, we're going to say unisex. And that's going to be equal to unisex, like so. And then now what we can do is we can actually grab this enum. And instead of saying that this is going to be a generic string, we can just define that this is going to be of type gender. So now, instead of saying string girl, we'll say gender dot girl like so. Now we can actually do the exact same thing for the popularity. So popularity as well as the length. So for the popularity, we are going to, I forgot the options. I think it was trendy. And then also over here, I forgot the option for this again. I think it was unique. Unique, like so. So let's go ahead and change the value of those as well. So we're going to say trendy. And then unique. And then over here for the length, we're going to have short is equal to short. Short, like so. We're also going to have long. That's equal to long. And lastly, we're going to have all. And that's equal to all, like so. So over here, what we can do is say popularity. And then over here, we can say length. So again, now, if you want to specify something, you're going to have to explicitly say length dot whatever it is. You don't have the option to add length dot medium. You only have these options right over here. So that ensures that, well, we're going to pick the right thing. So trendy, like so. So there we go. So this is really, really good. Now, of course, the application is working the way you expected because we didn't apply these types over here. So what I want to do is actually want to get rid of this object. This was just like kind of a test object. We don't really need that. But what I want to do is I want to grab this type and apply it to this reactive state. In order to do that, you might be thinking we can just do, well, the same thing that we did over here. So we could do just colon and then that. But that's actually not how it works. And to prove it to you, let's just go back, get that object that we had before. Let's copy that and let's paste that in there. And then over here, let's do colon and then this. Actually, well, I guess that does work. But the way that I prefer doing it is over here, right in the reactive. What you can do is you can add these brackets, these triangle brackets, and then you can add the state right in there. And that accomplishes the exact same thing. So now, again, if you decided to put in like a random string, it's going to yell at us. Let's go ahead and save this. And right now you can see it's actually working the exact same way because these values over here, they correspond to these values right here. Now, to actually make this a little bit better, what we can do is we can actually grab these enums and we can utilize them inside of these classes. So instead of saying that the options.gender is equal to the string boy, we can say that this is going to be equal to gender dot and then boy, like so. And this should work a-okay. So this should work the exact same way. So over here, we can say gender dot unisex. And then over here, gender dot girl. And if we save that, again, it's working the exact same way. Girl is still highlighted over here. So let's go ahead and actually do that in here as well. So we're gonna say option, or sorry, this is gonna be popularity, the enum popularity dot. This is, which one is this one? Trendy. Okay. And then let's just copy that in, and we're going to say unique here. Unique. And let's go right over here. We're going to say length dot, and over here we're going to say long. Let's grab that. We're going to say all over here. So length dot all. And then lastly, we're going to say length dot shorts. Okay. So again, works exactly the same way. So this is looking great, and I hope you guys actually learned quite a bit about TypeScript when doing this. And the reason why we would want to utilize TypeScript is it's very, very powerful and important to utilize. In this video, what we're going to do is very simply start updating the state when we click on a particular button. So this should be relatively easy to accomplish. So what I'm going to do here is let's just start off with this button right here. When you click on this button, we should change the gender from gender.girl to gender.boy. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to go ahead and add this @click. So @click event listener. And as soon as we click, what we want to do is we want to grab the options. So we're going to say options. So options, like so. We're going to say .gender. We're going to say that that is going to be equal to gender.boy. And that's pretty much all it is that we need to do. So what this should do is actually change the state and thus the background color. Let's give this a quick test. And well, it actually changed this state over here. However, this background color has not changed. So another reason for that is because it's boy, capital, like so. So just refresh that. And now, there we go. Now it's working the way that we expect it to. So just go ahead and copy this a few times. And this time we're going to say unisex for this. So unisex. And for this, we're going to say girl. And then let's scroll down a little bit more. And over here, this time we're going to change the popularity. So popularity. We're going to say that this is going to be popularity.trendy. Let's go ahead and copy that. And then over here, we're going to say unique. Okay. And over here, I think we should have this as 3, not as 2, because I believe this is 2. So right over here, let's go ahead and copy this once more. This time we're going to change the length. So we're going to say options.length. It's going to be length.long. Let's go ahead and copy that one more time. We're going to say over here, options.length. This is going to be all. And the last thing is short. So this should change our state the way that, well, we intend it to. So if we go over here, now we have the option to just click on whatever it is that we want, and it will change the state as well as the background colors. In this video, what we're going to do is add a button right over here that is going to compute all of the different names based on the categories and options that we have selected. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to add that button. So what I want you to do is I want you to go right over here to the options container, click on that div. Now options, not option with the S. Click on that div, scroll all the way down. And then right over here between this div and this div, we're going to add that button. And this is going to be, well, find names like so. So over here, you can see we have that button. Now let's go ahead and style this a little bit. I'm going to give this a class of primary, like a primary button. So over here, let's go ahead and add some of those primary styles. So let's go ahead and do just that. So the first thing I'm going to do is apply a nice background color. I'm going to say RGB, and then I'm going to say 24987, and then 89. I'm going to say the color is going to be white, I'm going to say the border radius is going to be around 6.5 rems. And then what we're going to do is we're going to give this a border of none, a padding of 0.75 rems, and also 4 rems. We're also going to give it a font size of 1 rem, a margin top of, let's say, 1 rem, and a cursor pointer. That's pretty much all it is that we need. And there we go. How pretty is that? So that's looking really good. Okay, so now what do we want to do? Well, when we click on this button, what I want to do is I want to compute all of the different names that, belong into the categories that were selected. So what I'm going to do just for now, instead of showing those cards, what I'm going to do is I am going to create another piece of state, because at the end of the day, this is state. And I'm going to call this names. So I'm going to call this piece of state names like so. And instead of this being reactive, I'm going to use ref, because this is just going to be a simple array. So I'm going to say ref, and then this is going to be an array. Now, it's actually also a good thing to define the type of the array, because right now we could have an array of numbers, we could have an array of strings, we could have whatever it is that we want. And just to prove that to you, we could do names dot push, and we can push in a string like so. Or sorry, we can't do that. We say dot value, and then over here we can say dot push, and we can push in a string. And we can also do names dot value dot push, and we can also push in a number, and that's fine. That's a-okay. However, obviously we don't want to do this. We only want to push in a string, which is the name itself. So we need to define a type. Now, how do we define an array type? Well, that's pretty easy. So we're going to say string because we want it to be a string, but we also want it to be an array of strings. So we say string and then just brackets, specifying that this is going to be an array of strings. So now you can see here, it's yelling at us, telling us that, hey, we need to pass a string in, not a number. Okay, so that's looking good. So now that we have our state, and actually maybe a better name for this is something like selected names, or you know what, we'll just keep it as names. I think that's a-okay. So now what we need to do is we need to start computing the names. So what I want you to do is I want you to go to my GitHub page, and I'll have the link in the description below. And what we're going to need to do is grab a list of all of the different names. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to go to my repository. You guys do not have to do this. I'm going to have the link in the description below. And over here I have if I go over here I have this data. And right over here I have this names.ts. Let me just zoom in here a little bit. So names.ts. And right over here we have a bunch of different names that we can utilize. So I'm going to go ahead and copy all of these different names. So all of these different names are objects. They have an ID. There's the name itself. And then over here, I specify the category that this belongs to. So this name right over here, it's a girl name. It's very trendy and it's long. Right over here, this is a girl name, trendy, and it's short. So we have just an array of different names that we have. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy all of this. So I'll copy all of that. And I'm going to create, right in here, I'm going to create a data.ts file. This is where we're going to store that data. Now, right over here, notice that I actually already have the enums right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to grab these enums because these enums use the capitalization and I actually prefer that. So over here, we're going to say, we're going to utilize those enums. Now, what we need to do is because we have these enums here and they're being used here, we don't want to, of course, duplicate them in here as well because this is just not code duplicity. So instead, what we're going to do here is we're going to export each one of these enums like so. And then we're going to import them into this file. So let's just go ahead and get rid of this. Now in here, we're going to say import and then from, and then we can say from at. So this is going to be the root directory, then slash data. And then over here, we're going to say I want to import gender. I want to import popularity. I also want to import the length. So let's go ahead and save that. So now we have imported the enums. Now the names also have a type. I have defined the type over here. So this is right here saying that the names is going to be an array of this interface, and I defined this interface right over here, which is going to have an ID, a name, and then over here the gender should actually be the enums themselves. So we're going to say gender like so, and then popularity is going to be popularity, and then length is going to be length. There we go. So that should be okay. So now what we can do is we can actually get the names as well. So this is the data. This is the array that we're going to utilize and iterate over and eventually figure out, how we want to filter it for our specific options. Now this is going to give us an error because, well, we have names here and we also have names over here. So I'm going to also say here that this is going to be called something like selected names, just so we don't have that little mismatch. Okay, so this is looking really, really good. So now what we're going to do is, for the selected names, for now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to display it right in the bottom. So right over here, right after this, I'm just going to display the selected names. And now if we go all the way over here, if I were to zoom in a little bit, you can see it's an empty array. Now what I want to do is when I click this button, I actually want to perform the computation that is going to populate this with a bunch of different strings. So let's actually do that computation in the next video. In this video, what we're going to do is actually compute the names based on the option state that we have. So what I want to do is right over here, when we click this button, I'm going to add a click handle, event handler. And when I call this, or when I click this button, what I want to do is I want to call a function called compute selected names, like so. So let's go all the way right over here and let's actually define that function. So I'm going to say const compute selected names, and that's just going to be a regular arrow function. So now what we want to do here in this function is figure out all of the names that belong to the category that our state is currently in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say const filtered names, and I'm going to say that this is going to be equal to the names array that we have over here, and then I'm going to say dot filter. So I want to filter this array. So the first filter is going to be filter by the gender. So right over here, let's define a callback that's going to grab every single name. And then, well, what I want to do is I want to check the name.gender. So I want to see what that name.gender is. Remember, each name has a gender. And I only want to return it if the name.gender triple equals what we have, the options.gender. So right now we have all of the options being girls. So we're only going to return all of the girls at that point. And it's going to return to us an array. So let's just go ahead and save that for now. Now, because this is going to return to us an array, we can actually apply another dot filter and do the exact same thing with popularity. So over here, let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to grab the name, and then what we're going to do is we're going to say name dot, and this time popularity. We want to check that the options is going to be options dot popularity, like so. There we go. And this is going to now return us all of the different names that belong to this group right over here. So girl as well as trendy. Now, the last thing that we want to do is, well, get the length. The length is going to be a little bit more complicated because if we supply all, we just want to get all of the names that are still there, regardless if they're short or long. So now what we're going to do is just apply another dot filter. Let's have a callback function like so. This time we're going to use curly braces because we're going to have multiple lines here. So what I'm going to say is if options, so if the option dot length triple equals length dot all, then what we're going to do is just very simply just return true. because at the end of the day, what this is returning is a Boolean value. So each time we iterate through a particular name, we are either returning true or false on whether we want to have that into the new filtered array. So if it's all, then we just want to return true. It doesn't matter if they're short or long. Else, then what we want to do is we want to return name dot length. We're going to say here that this is equal to options dot length. Now, if this doesn't make sense to you, this filter callback and what we're doing, I highly suggest maybe watching a video or reading some documentation. I do expect you to know this if you are trying to learn Nuxt. So this is just kind of vanilla JavaScript that you should probably know as a prerequisite. Okay, so what this is going to do is going to give us all of the names. And then what we want to do is now assign this state to the filtered names. So over here, I'm going to say selected names dot value is equal to, I'm going to call this filtered names. I'm going to say filtered names. Now, right away, this is the power of TypeScript. Right over here, we define that this is going to be an array of strings. However, if I hover over this, well, now this is actually an array of names, not an array of strings. So this could have been an innocent mistake that we definitely would have done, but with TypeScript, we were able to catch it. So now what I can do is I can actually do a dot map. So I can iterate over this and return another array. And over here, I can just very simply just say, I want to return the name dot name right over here. So I'm going to say name dot name like so, and that's just going to give us an array of strings. Okay, so let's actually go ahead and give this a quick test. So I'm going to say boy, I'm going to say short, and I'm going to say unique. Let's go ahead and do this, and now you can see we get Lath, Lamello, Selma, and Asher. And if I actually went over here, so Lamello is short and unique and is a boy. We get, what else do we have? We had Lath somewhere in there, right here. We got Asher, boy, unique, short. And what was the last one? Selma, wherever that is, right here. Okay, now we can, of course, do the same thing for something else now. So we can go say girl, trendy, all. We get Olivia, Brooklyn, Zoe, Valentina, Josine, Maya, Ivy, whatever. So this is good. So you can see that this is actually working the way that we expected. But now what I want to do is I want to iterate over this array and render cards. Obviously, I don't want to render an array. This isn't a very nice user experience. I actually want to render cards. So let's go ahead and do that in the next video. The next step in our process is to convert this array of names into nice looking cards. So let's actually go ahead and do that right now. So in order to do that, what I'm going to do is right below the div, so this div right over here that contains all of the different options, so the options container, right below it, I'm going to create another div, and I'm going to give it a class of cards container. So I'm going to say cards container. So this is going to house all of the different name cards. Now right in here, this is where we're going to have all of our cards. So I'm going to create a div for this, for each individual card. I'm going to give this a class of card like so. And then right in there, we're going to have the p tag for the card. Now what we're going to do is we're going to actually iterate over this, of course. So in order to do this, we're going to use a v4. And we're going to say v4 name in selected names. And then we're going to need to provide a key. So each name should be unique, so the name should serve as the key as well. And then right over here, we are going to supply it with the name itself. So if you go over here, you should see our names. Now, of course, they're not styled nicely, so let's go ahead and apply these styles. So the first thing that I'm going to do is for this cards container, which is going to be the container that contains everything, I'm going to go over here. And I am going to give this a display of flex. And then I'm going to give this a margin top of 3 rems. And lastly, a flex wrap of wrap. Just so it can wrap nice and well. Okay, so that is looking a-okay. I'm actually pretty happy with that. But now what we need to do is start styling the cards themselves. So let's go over here. We're going to say card. And then right over here, we're going to say the background color. This is going to be RGB. RGB. We're going to say 276138. So nice little blue color there. We're going to give this a width of 28%. So 28%. So we can have around, I believe, maybe 3 per row. So 28%. We're also going to give this a color of white. We're going to give this a border radius of 1 rem, padding of 1 rem, a margin left, or a margin right rather, of 0.5 rem. And then we're going to give it a margin bottom of 1 rem. So margin bottom of 1 rem. And I think that should be it for the card themselves. Now let's go ahead and style the P tag inside of the card. So this is just going to be, let's give this over here a position of relative. And I'll show you exactly why we need this later. It's just really to style that X button, which I'll show a little bit later. But for now, we'll say this one's position absolute. And then over here, we're going to say that this is going to be top negative 30%. And we're also going to say left. This is going to be 95.5%. We're going to say here cursor. That's going to be pointer. And over here, the color is going to be an RGBA. And then over here, we're going to have just all black. But because it's an RGBA, I'm also going to specify, some opacity. So you might be thinking, why did we do this? Well, the reason why we did this is because inside of here, so inside of this right here, we're going to actually have that X. So that X where that's going to allow us to close. And I want that to be in the top right corner. And so that's why we did all those extra additional, position relative and stuff like that. So right over here, what we're going to do is inside of the HTML, the name itself is actually going to live just outside of the card. And then right over here inside of the P tag, we're just going to have that X like so. And we could even wrap this in maybe like an H4 and put that in there like that. Okay, so now you can see that we're getting our things. Now this is a little bit bigger than I thought it would be. So let's go over here to this. And let's look at why it's too big. The padding 0.1 rem. I think that's what I meant to do. Okay. And you can see here we have this little X. Maybe we can even just make it negative 29%. And there we go. You can see very faintly we have that X. So now if we go ahead and we start clicking on all these different things, as you can see, it's working the way that we expect it to. So this is really, really good. Maybe all here. You can see we get all of our different options. So this is looking really, really good. However, obviously there's still quite a bit of flaws with this. Let's go ahead and remove this. So the first flaw that you might see right away is that these X's don't work. So they don't allow us to actually delete this. So we need to fix that later. But there's also some other issues with the way that we structured our code that I'm going to try to resolve in the next videos. In the last video, I mentioned that the way that we structured our code is not ideal. In this video, I'm going to explain exactly what I mean by that. So what do I mean by that? Well, in order to understand, let's actually look at this div and all of the HTML elements inside of it. So the div with the option container. So we have this div right over here. And then inside of this div, we have this H4 that has the title of the option. And then right over here, we also have this div that is going to house all of the buttons. And then we have all of the button options. All of them have relatively the same class. Now, if we go over here, let's go all the way to the bottom, you can see that we actually have another option container, and similarly, the HTML structure is exactly the same. We have an h4, and then we also have this buttons option div, and then we have buttons inside of it. Now, the number of buttons might be different, but we still have buttons with the same structure nonetheless. And the same thing applies over here. So we have the div, we have the h1, we have the container, we have the buttons. So you can see here that we are reusing this HTML template multiple times throughout our application. Now, this is causing a lot of code duplication. And when we have something like this, what is this a good candidate for? Well, it's a good candidate to put it into a component and then just pass the necessary data that it needs via props. So what do I mean by that? Well, why don't we actually just place this over here, this whole div inside of a component, and just pass the data that it needs. What data does it need? Well, it needs to have the title, and it also needs to have the button data. So let's actually take a look at a quick diagram to understand this. So right now we have three different option containers. So we can just have three different components, and then we can just iterate over them. And for each component, we can just give it a title that is going to be choose gender, and then we can give it an array of the different buttons, and then we can just give each button value. So gender.boy, gender.unisex, gender.girl. Now over here, we can do the exact same thing and input it for space reasons. But over here, we can also have choose the length, and then we can have all of the different lengths. And that's really all it is that we need to pass. Another thing that we also will need to pass is the option state. And we already have that here, so we can just go ahead and pass that in relatively easily. So let's actually go ahead and create a component for this and start passing in the data that is necessary. And that's really going to clean up our code. Right now, let's actually take a look at how long our code is. It's around 205 lines of code for this app.view file. And let's just see exactly how much shorter it gets once we finish writing this component. So let's just keep a quick note here that it was 205. So let's just write a comment, 205. I'm not sure if that's a comment. Maybe you can put the comment here, 205 lines of code. Okay, so let's just go ahead and do this right now. Now, the way that we build components in Nuxt is a little bit differently. So what we're going to do here is we're going to create a directory called components. I already created this. Let me actually delete it and just do it again with you guys. So what we're going to do here is we're going to create a directory, not in the node modules, in the root directory. We're going to create a directory called components. And it has to be called components because any file that lives in here, any view file that lives in here, Nuxt is going to detect that as a component and is going to give it a special ability that we usually don't get with just plain old view. So right over here, I am going to create a component. So I'm going to create an option.view file. And then right over here, I'm going to define a template. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab one of the option containers. So I'm going to go over here and let's just grab, that's the options container. Let's just grab one of these option containers. Zoom over here. Let's grab that. And let's paste that here. And now let's start passing in some of this data. So we need to pass in some data as props. So what I'm going to do actually inside of the app.view, I'm going to create an array with all of the different option data. So over here, I'm going to create options array. And then over here, these are going to be all of the different options. So the first option is we're going to have an object here. It's going to have a title of choose a gender. And then we're going to specify all of the different buttons over here. So we're going to say gender.girl. Then we're going to say gender.unisex. We're also going to say gender.boy. Now, another thing that we also have to pass in is exactly what category this falls in, because the button eventually is going to update the option dot gender or option.popularity or option.length. So I have to specify what category does this option fall in. So I'm going to say over here that this falls in category gender. So the gender category. And that's really all it is that we need. So now let's go over here and let's add now. So this is going to be the popularity. So choose the name's popularity. So popularity. And then over here, this is going to update the popularity. And then over here, we're going to have our array of buttons. So obviously, this is going to be popularity dot, let's say, trendy. And then over here, we only have 2 buttons. So it's going to be popularity dot unique. Let's save that. 1 more left. Let's just copy what we have here, paste that in there. And then right over here, we're going to say 3. And we are going to say choose the name's length. So choose name's length. And this is going to be length. That's the category that we want to update. Remember, we want to update this category when we click on a specific button. And then over here, we're going to say length dot, let's do short. And over here, we're going to do length dot, so length dot all. And then over here, length dot long. Length dot, oh, that's gender. Obviously, we want length here. I was wondering why that wasn't showing up. Okay, so now we have our array. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove all of the different option containers that we have. So I'm going to go over here to the options container. I'm going to scroll all the way down to this div, and then all the other divs up until the options container, I'm just going to delete all the HTML elements. So over here, let's just delete all that. And what I'm going to do now is I am just going to display the option component. Now you might be wondering exactly how are we going to display the option component? Do we need to import it? Do we need to define it? No, actually all we need to do is just display it like this. And this right here is going to have the same exact name as we called it right over here in the view file. So what actually ends up happening is because we put our component in the components directory, Nuxt is smart enough to auto import it in. So if this wasn't called components, we wouldn't have this ability, but we can just auto import it in without having any manual imports ourselves. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have a v-for. So we're going to iterate over the options array. So for each option, so option in options, and then we're going to need to supply a key. So let's just say option.title. That's always going to be unique. And that's exactly how we are going to display it. And right away, you can see that we went from 205 lines of code to 153 lines of code. That's because now we just removed a huge block of our HTML that was relatively unnecessary. We should have definitely had it somewhere else. Now, of course, if we go to our web page and I do a quick refresh, you can see it's not going to work. And that's because now what we need to do is start passing in some props. And once we pass in the props, then we can go ahead and start populating this data accordingly. So let's actually go ahead and do that in the next video. So now that we have created this component, let's start passing in the necessary data via props. So we need to just pass in pretty much everything that we have here, which is actually stored in this option object. So very simply, in order to do this, we can just say : option is equal to option like so. So that's going to be the first thing that we're going to pass in, and that's pretty much going to deal with the title as well as the button values as well as the category. Now we also need the options state. Well, this is relatively easily, can be easily done as well. All we can do here is just say options, and then this can be options like so, which is going to correspond to our option state over here. So that is actually all it is that we need to pass in to our component. But now what we need to do is accept those props and then utilize them inside of our template. So over here, I'm going to go ahead and just write a script tag. Let's get rid of all of this stuff. We're going to say script setup. We're also going to say that the language is going to be TypeScript, of course. So now what I'm going to do is I am going to get access to these props. Now with script setup, we have this thing called define props that we can auto import. And then right over here, we invoke it. And then inside of an object, we typically describe the type of the props. So over here, we're expecting an option, and that's going to be an object. And then over here, we can also say options, and that's also going to be an object, like so. So just as a quick clarification, the option is going to be just one of these objects in this array, so it could be this. And then the options object is going to be all of these right over here. So our state. So it's going to be an object and it's going to be an object. However, the issue with this that I find is that, this is very, very generic and it's not really going to give us a lot of good typing. So because we're using TypeScript, we actually don't necessarily have to do it this way. Instead, what we can do is we can actually utilize an interface to define the types of our props. So over here, I can say something like interface, and I can say option props. And then over here, I can say option. And I can say over here that this option key is also going to be an object. It's going to have a title. The title is going to be a string. Over here, it's also going to have a category. The category is going to be a string. And then it's going to have a set of buttons. And this is going to be an array. So it's going to be an array with either all gender items, all popularity items, or all length items. So over here, what we can actually do is we can say gender, and we can actually auto import that in. So over here, we can auto import imports gender from @data. We can say that this is going to be either an array of gender enum values, or let's go ahead over here and grab popularity. And let's also grab length. So over here we can say, or it's going to be an array of popularity enum values, or it's going to be an array of length enum values. So that's just one thing that we can do to specify that it could be either one or the other. Now over here, let's also define what the options is going to look like. So the options is going to look like, we're going to have a key that is going to be gender. That's going to be a value of gender. We're also going to have popularity. That's going to have a value of popularity. And then length. That's going to have the value of length. And now, instead of defining it like we did before, we can just use those curly or these triangle brackets right over here. Right in there, we can define our props. So now what we can do, if we do props dot, you can see that it knows exactly what is going to be in there, and it knows exactly what that type is. So that's just another, and I think a better way of defining our props. Okay, so this is looking really good. So now let's actually utilize those props inside of our template. So the first thing that I want to do here is I want to get rid, and actually let's just go ahead and comment out the buttons for now, just so we can see our progress. I'm going to comment them out. And then right over here, I'm just going to go ahead and save this and refresh. And now you see here that we have 3 choose your genders. Why do we have that? Because we're iterating over this array. So this array has 3 elements. So we have 3 different iterations, and we're rendering this options component 3 different times. And right now, inside of the options component, we basically just have an H1 with this hard-coded text. So you can see that this works. But now what I actually want to do instead is I want to access the props.title. Now, inside of the template, we actually don't have to say props.option.title. Instead, what we can very simply use is just the object, the key inside of the prop itself. So what I mean by that is we don't have to do props.option.title. Instead, we can actually forego the props itself and just say option.title. Now, if we did that, you can very quickly see we have choose your gender, choose your popularity. Let me zoom in here once more, and choose your name length. So it's working A-okay. Now let's go ahead and start rendering some of these buttons. Now the buttons are going to be a little bit more complicated, and I'll show you why in a bit. But really here, what we want to do is we just want to iterate. We just want to have one button, and we want to render a button for every single element that we have in this array. So let's go ahead over here, and what we're going to do is we're going to add a v4. So we're going to say v4 is equal to, and then over here, what we're going to do is we're going to grab the value, because this is going to be either, gender dot boy, gender dot whatever. I'm going to call that the value. I'm going to say in option dot button. Is that what we called it here? Option dot buttons. And then, of course, we need to give it a key. And over here, the key could be value because that is going to be unique. Okay, so we're going to do this iteration. And then what we're going to do for the text is we're going to render the value itself. So remember, the value is indeed going to be an enum, but it actually corresponds to a text if you want to render it. And it's going to correspond to the text that we want, which is girl, boy, or unisex. So we're going to render that value in here. And then right over here, what we're going to do is we're going to utilize the options from our props. That's okay. And then over here, what we're going to do is instead of hard coding gender dot boy, we're going to say if that's equal to the value. And over here, we're going to say that that is also going to be equal to the value. And then over here, this could be popularity, this could be gender, this could be length. So over here, what we're going to say is that this is going to be option dot category like so. So option dot category. And there we go. I think that should be it, and everything should be working the way that we expect it to. Let's go ahead and save that. And now there we go. You can see that it is working. Now the problem is, and you probably can guess what the problem is here now, is that the styling is scoped to the app.view file, and that's where our styles currently live. So what we need to do is now just create another style sheet that is going to be scoped, and what we need to do is just grab all of these options, all of these classes. So the options container can stay in here, but almost everything else, so the option container, the option buttons, the option active, all that we can just pretty much cut it out, save it here, and then paste it right in there. So there we go. So now that's looking a-okay. So let's actually go and give this a quick test. And now, of course, you can see right away we have this one huge issue when it comes to the styling. We'll fix that later, but let's just check if this works. So if I click on this, this should change the state in the app.view, and it does. So that is looking good. Let's just pick boy, unique, long, and we click on that, we get these. Okay, I'm assuming this is right. Harrison, and maybe Harrison's not that unique, but whatever this name is, this is definitely unique. I'm going to try to pronounce it just for you guys. I suck at pronouncing names. Bartholomew. Okay. I give up. But you can see here where it is working a-okay. But right now we're getting a huge problem when it comes to the styling. Because right now what we're doing actually is we're hard coding the option left. So what we need to do is we actually need to figure out a way to exactly compute what the class should be. So let's actually do that in the next video. In this video, what we're going to do is we're going to solve this styling issue that we are facing currently. So you can see right now, everything has a border radius to the left, which is not what we want. Instead, what we want is a border radius to the left for the leftmost button and no border radius for anything in the middle. And then at the very rightmost button, we should have a border radius to the right. So if you're thinking right away, there actually is a way to accomplish this. So let's go over here to our app.view and let's look at these buttons over here. So very simply, what we can do here is we can check the index of the element that we are iterating over. So remember over here, we're iterating over the buttons. So the buttons right over here, and then we're rendering obviously a button for each one. Now what we can also do over here inside of our v4 is grab the index of the element that we are iterating over. So we can grab that index. Now over here, we can check, okay, if the index is 0, that means it is going to be the leftmost button, and we need to apply the option left class. If it's somewhere in the middle, then we don't want to apply that. And if it's all the way to the right, meaning that it is the length of the array minus 1, because indexes work 0, 1, 2. This is going to be the length of 3. So minus 1 is going to be 2. That means that this is at the very end, and we should apply the option right class. So that is what we're going to need to do. We're going to need to create a function that is going to compute our class. However, it's a little bit more complicated because right over here, we're also doing another computation to determine the class. Right over here, we're computing if this is the active class, and then we're providing the option active. So we actually need to also include this right over here inside of our computation. So let's actually go ahead and create a function for this. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a function, and I'm going to call this compute button classes like so. And this is going to take two values in, the value, and it's also going to take in the index. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to define all of the class names in an array. Because again, we could have multiple different class names that we want to add. For example, we could want to add, in this case, for example, we want to add the option left as well as the option active. However, for other ones, we might just want to add option left or option active only. But again, we could have multiple, or we could just have one. So if we have multiple, I just want to store them in an array. If we also have one, I'll just store that one element in that array as well. So the first thing that I want to do is let's actually just do this check right over here. And if this check right here is true, then I'm going to go ahead and push the option active into this array. So I'm going to say if, and I'm going to get access to the props here. So I'm going to say props. And then over here, I can pretty much just copy this check right over here. I can say if props, and then, so if props dot options, and then over here, we can say props dot option dot category is equal to the value that we're going to pass in. Then what do I want to do? Well, I'm just going to say class name dot push. And then, of course, I'm going to push option active. Okay, so that's pretty much all it is that we need to do to handle the active class. Now what we want to do is we want to start handling the either option left or option right class. So this was actually pretty easy. This is where we're going to start using the index. So we're going to say if the index is equal to 0, that means this is going to be the leftmost button. Then what we're going to do is we're going to say class names dot push, and over here we're going to say option left. That's what we want to push. Now let's handle the rightmost button. So over here, what we're going to do is we're going to say if index is equal to props dot option dot buttons dot length minus 1. Then what we're going to do is we're going to say class name dot push, and then over here we're going to say option right like so. So this is going to give us an array of different classes, but obviously we cannot put that array inside of our class. We need a string for this. So at the very end, what we're going to do after we've done all these if statement, all these conditional checks, what we're going to do is we're going to return class name and then dot join, and then we're going to join with a space. So what this is going to do is let's say we have an array like this, option active, and then over here we have option left. What this is going to do is it's going to take this first element and it's going to put it inside of a string. So it's going to say option active, and then it's going to take this element and also put it in the string. But before it does that, it's going to apply whatever we put over here, which is a space. So it's going to say space and then option left. And that's exactly how we're going to apply classes. So over here, we can get rid of that. Now what we can do here is actually grab this compute button class, and right over here inside of this class, we can just invoke it and we can pass that value in as well as the index. So now if we come back here and do a quick refresh, let's do that little quick refresh. So it seems as though we have a little bit of a bug here. Let's see why that is. We're still getting some of that, we're still getting some radius to the left here. However, we're not getting anything here. We're not getting anything here. So it seems something in the middle is messing things up. So if the index is equal to 0, okay. So for some reason, we're hitting this block right here. So let's actually see why we're doing that. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to console. I know exactly why this is happening. We need to remove this right here. So let's go ahead and remove that. And there we go. So yeah, that was pretty much it. Yeah, I accidentally left that class there. But now there we go. So you can see that that is working. And let's just look at actually how much lines of code we saved. So we were at 201 and now we're at 129. And that's because now we extracted a lot of these HTML as well as CSS into their own file, which is going to make our code significantly more reusable. Okay, good friends, we have completely finished working on this component and I am pretty proud about it. Now what I want to do is something maybe a little bit simpler. Now what I want to do is I want to extract this right over here into its own component. So remember, this is the name card. So let's go over here, and usually what you would do is, well, you would create another file in here. And you can call this name card, or you can call this whatever it is that you want. However, let's say you want to create another directory in here. So maybe over here you want to create a card directory because you might have multiple cards in your application. And then right in here, you can say that this is going to be the name.view file. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and just grab this. So this is the component that we have. And I'm going to put it inside of a template. And then right now, just for now, let's remove all of this. And then over here, let's just put in lathe. And let's go ahead and add a little bit of style. So I'm going to move some of these styles here. So we need the card, we need the card P, and I believe that's all it is that we really need. Let's go ahead and save that. And now what I want to do is I want to render this component. So how are we going to do that? So I want to render it right over here. So you might be thinking, well, I can just say name like so, because that is the name of the file. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. I'm going to comment this out for now. So go ahead and save that, comment this out, and let me just go ahead and refresh, and you can see that we're not rendering anything. So why is that? Well, that's because we actually nested this name.view file inside of this card directory. So now if we want to auto import that in, what we should do is get the folder directory, so the name of this directory, and then also the name of the file. So if we want to render that, it's going to look something like this, card name. So again, the name of the directory and then the name of the file. So over here, we're going to go ahead and save that, and let's go back over here, and right away you can see that it is working. Now, of course, we can have multiple directories, multiple nested directories. So for example, let's add another directory here just saying hello, something like that. And then right over here, let's actually move that right in there. I'm just going to go ahead and let's just skip the changes. So I'm going to move this. So let's go ahead and add that directory again. So I'm going to say hello. Or where is that? It's saying it's there. Oh, yeah, there it is. Okay, so it was actually in there, which is a little confusing for me. Now, if you go ahead and refresh, you can see that, well, now it's yelling at us about this. So over here, now what we're going to do is we're going to change card hello name. And there we go. You can see that it is working A-okay. So it's going to be this name plus this name plus this name. Now, obviously, I don't want this. I'm going to move it right back. Skip the changes. And I am going to get rid of this hello directory. And I'm going to move this right back to card name. Okay. So there we go. You can see it is working fine. Okay, so this is looking really good. But now what we need to do is we need to start passing in some data. So we're going to iterate over this. So we're going to iterate over this card name. So we're going to have a v4 in here. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to go ahead and just pass in the name. And the name is just going to be a string. So it's going to be a unique string. Let's go ahead and do that. Now over here, we need to accept it. So inside of our script tag, I'm just going to go ahead, script, get rid of all this junk. I'm going to say over here, script setup lang is equal to TypeScript. And then right over here, we're going to very similarly accept the props. So let's go over here. We're going to say props is going to be equal to define props. And over here, let's define an interface for this. I'm going to say something like name props. So name props. And this is only going to have a string, or sorry, a name that is going to be a string. That's all it's going to have. So let's go ahead and copy that in there. And now, because we have defined the props, right over here, we can actually have our actual name. So you can say name like so. So now let's go ahead and do that, and it is not working. So why is that not working? We got name here. What I'm going to do just to double check is console.log the props. Let's console.log the props just to see exactly what we are getting. So we're going to say console. Go to the console here. We're getting a proxy. I'm just going to go ahead and refresh this. Search. Okay. Search. I'm not sure exactly what happened before, but now it's working. So I'm honestly flustered why that happened before, but now you can see that it is working a-okay. I probably just needed to refresh. So that's pretty much it. And this lesson was really mainly about how we can deal with components that are nested in other directories. And now you guys know exactly how that works. So we're almost pretty much done this application. The only thing that we need to do now is figure out exactly how we can start deleting different names that we are not interested in. So let's actually figure out how we can do that in the next video. The last thing that we need to do is make this delete button functional. So when we click on it, it should delete that particular name. However, the issue that we have right now is that delete button lives inside of the name.view. However, when we click on this, it needs to affect this array right over here, which lives inside of the app.view. So if this doesn't make much sense to you, let's look at a diagram. So right now, the app.view, it houses the array of selected names. And then the name.view, it doesn't have any of those arrays. Instead, it just has that one name that it is supposed to show. Now, it has no reference to this array, and thus how are we going to update it? Well, we can update it one of two ways. We can go ahead and pass that array to the name and then just go ahead and update it in there. Or what we can do, and this is probably a better idea, we can emit an event. So right inside of the app.view, we can create this remove name functions. We can have this remove function, and we can call this function anytime the name.view emits a remove event. And once it emits this remove event, it's going to also pass in that name. We can catch that name inside of the parameter and then just remove that name entirely from the array. So let's actually go ahead and implement this. So let's actually go over here, right to the card name. And what we want to do is we want to say that we are going to listen to a remove event. So right over here, we're going to say @remove. And as soon as, we emit a remove event, I'm going to call a callback function that is going to call a function that we haven't created yet called remove name. And then it's also going to pass in the index of that particular element. So let's go over here and let's go all the way to the script and let's actually create that function. So let's go right over here. I think this is pretty good. Maybe right here, right below the actual state. We're going to create that remove name function. And then this is going to take in the index, of course. And this index, let's define it as a number, just for TypeScript's sake. And now what we're going to do is we're going to say the filtered names. So what we want to do is we want to get basically all of the names except the name that lies in this index. So we can say filtered names is equal to, and we can say a brand new array. And we can say selected names.value. So this is just basically destructuring the current array into a brand new array. But then what we need to do now is very simply do a filtered name dot splice. And then over here, we're going to say at that particular index and then 1. So whatever this index is at, we want to essentially splice that out. And we just want to splice out one element at that index. So we're just going to splice out that particular index entirely. And then very simply, we're going to say selected names dot value is equal to filtered names. So that's really all it is that we need to do from the app.view side. There's one last thing that we also need to do. Right over here, we also need to pass the index. So right over here, we can say index. And then over here, we can say index is equal to. So index is equal to index like so. Okay, so that's all it is that we need. And then inside of the name.view, now what we need to do is start emitting events. So let's go ahead and do that. So right here, what we're going to say is const, and then this is going to be emit, is equal to define emits. So over here, we're just going to define all of the different emissions that we can do. Now, right now, we can only do a remove event because that's exactly what we defined right over here. So we're going to say remove. And then over here, we're going to create another function. So we're going to call this remove name. And this function is very simply going to emit a remove event. So we're going to call emit. We're going to say remove. And then as a parameter, we're going to pass in the props.index. So let's go over here and actually define that we also get an index. So over here, we're going to say props.index like so. Now, all that is that we need to do is right over here, we're going to say @click, and we're just going to call the function remove name like so. So that's pretty much all it is that we need to do. So let's just give this a quick refresh. Let's just get a bunch of names here. And if we're not interested in them, as you can see, now they're getting deleted. So all these different names are getting deleted like so. Now, of course, we can click on it again and just get the names back and then delete them again. But that works a-okay. So I hope you guys learned exactly how we can start emitting events, communicating from the child to the parent, and actually manipulating the state there. And that is actually going to conclude our project. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And now let's actually go ahead and move on to bigger and better.